Okay, so according to the vote last week, the popular demand is we talk about DAOs, decentralized autonomous organization. So to give a little bit of context, we're going to cover three main uh, topics: the history of DAOs, the recent rise of incentive-driven DAOs, and some future predictions about what it's gonna do to us. So number one, the history. So DAO as a concept, well, first of all, it represents a organization that runs fully on chain, on the blockchain. And so the first implementation of a DAO was back in 2016, and it was called the DAO. And the way it works is this. A set of contracts were deployed on Ethereum, where people could lock in their ETH token in exchange for voting rights. And then these people with this voting rights token, they can vote on certain projects they want to fund. And when a certain amount of threshold is reached, the money goes towards funding that business. So it acts sort of like a decentralized venture capital fund. Here's a quick overview of how it looks like. So you can see that, let's say you are the user, you deposit your ETH into the DAO smart contracts. In exchange, you get ERC20, which allows you to vote. And once you've voted on a certain project, for instance, and interestingly enough, you don't just vote to give money to a certain wallet, you vote on another smart contract. And that smart contract is going to decide how your funds go from DAO to the company. The terms, etc., are all specified in the smart contract. So yeah, essentially voting on a smart contract, voting for a smart contract. And so when the business repays, they repay the DAO contracts and not directly to you as the investors. And as predicted, this caught a lot of attention. In fact, it made its way to the Economist front page. And within a month, it actually attracted as much as 100 million, which accounts for almost 14% of all ETH in circulation at the time. However, unfortunately, within a month of its being deployed, it was the subject of a hack, which took away as much as 50% of the fund. Yep, 50 million was just drained from the smart contracts. And that actually caused so much drama that like people on Ethereum decided to fork, which is to create a different history where the hack did not happen. And this, of course, some people disagree with that decision. And as a result, we end up with two separate blockchains, Ethereum and Ethereum Classic, where people say, no, even though this is a bad hack, we have to acknowledge that it happened. So today you can still buy Ethereum Classic on the cryptocurrency exchange. So because this was such a short period of time, like no project was actually successfully funded by the DAO before it collapsed. Now you may ask, if this were a result of a hack, wouldn't people simply patch it, fix it, redeploy, and we can have more decentralized venture capital fund? Well, as it turns out, as soon as people started experimenting with this idea, they realized that there is more difficult challenges than meets the eye. So the first problem is lack of participation. So just now we talked about how people who invested in this DAO can vote on projects. But when do they vote? And how much vote is needed? That's a tough question, because now you have a decentralized company where people are from all 24 different time zones. How do you gather all of them to vote on a proposal? As a result, a lot of these proposals have voter participation rate of less than 20%. And you could imagine that since some users on the blockchain own a lot of tokens, they might own as much as like, let's say 5% or 2% of all tokens in circulation. That means one person is going to make disproportionate amount of influence with regard to voting. And so that's going to be bad. Number two, game theoretic attack, or also known as bribery. So on systems like these, you could easily write a smart contract. Like, so smart contract makes doing deals easy. It also makes doing bribery very easy. As simple as, if I pay you this amount of money, you agree to give that vote to me so I could vote on this particular proposal, right? So something like that happened actually in real life, where there was a social media platform here. It's called Steemit. So Steemit is a DAO governed social media platform where if you write a story, people can upvote it. And when the story gets upvoted, the author gets paid in the Steemit tokens. And the Steemit tokens actually has real value. So if you look at the amount here, the author of that article earned as much as $700 in Steemit tokens. Like, they could exchange it in crypto in the DEX if they want, but they could also use it to vote on the future like policies of this platform. Now, the problem is the person who created this Steemit platform, he pre-mined a lot of these tokens for himself. And in 2019, when this platform became big enough, he decided to sell his share to a rich billionaire, okay, by the name of Justin Sun. He's the founder of Tron blockchain. So yeah, he's a very well-known, notorious guy in the blockchain world. But anyways, he bought a lot of shares from the initial creator, and he wanted to make some changes that would basically start censoring the social media platform. Of course, a lot of people were against this, so they started like gathering all their governance token to vote this guy out. But then bribery happened. This guy just started buying votes, promising to pay extra to buy other people's governance tokens. And it actually reached a boiling point where like both sides had like 50-50 of the vote. It's quite an exciting story. I recommend you guys check it out, clicking the link. But in the end, like the whole scheme worked, and with money, Justin Sun was able to basically buy over the social media platform. So that shows you how sort of sometimes like volatile a DAO governed platform could be. Now, number three is regulatory uncertainty. So now we're talking about people having shares in an organization that has money and can invest and generate profit. Should it be classified as a company? Well, the SEC actually looked into this, and in 2016, they decided that the DAO, like the first experimentation, is actually classified as like it's not a company, but like its token is classified as security. And so only accredited investors can buy its share. So what it was doing previously was marked as illegal, basically. And so as a result of that, from 2017 up until 2019, the concept of DAO didn't really develop that much. So at this point, I kind of want to get some input from the audience, because we touched on two very sort of controversial subjects, or not controversial, like debatable subjects. So number one is, how much can we trust the DAO token holders, that is everyday people who buy the token, or also whales who buy the governance tokens, to govern a protocol properly? You guys have any input on that?
So when you say voting, is it a case of like $1 one vote, like
yeah,
kind of sounds similar to staking. Right?
It works similarly to staking. Staking is like coin voting, but purely for verifying transactions. Yeah, that's absolutely it. So there's a name for that. It's called coin voting, $1, one vote.
Seems like arbitration and organization feature like if other buildings contributed to Bitcoin smart tokens, I mean smart contracts. I definitely see how that opens up the window for stuff like the DAO's downfall. It's easy to tell in a human organization who the key contributors are and reward effort.
So do you think this coin voting mechanism makes sense, or as you mentioned, it's a feature rather than a bug? In what are some justifications do you think is there for such a system?
The coin voting feature quite that compared to any human social capital.
Right.
I was thinking like some can't really trust the long term. A lot of people just see things, especially on the crypto world, since it's like just developing, you can't really see like the long future. A lot of people just want like a short game comms.
Right.
And so like things that make out and seem good.
Right. That's a good point. Like if you trust the majority, or like if you give power to the majority, they are going to act in their most selfish interest, which sometimes may not align with the long-term goals of the protocols. And so the challenge for DAOs turned out to not be getting people to put money in because there are a lot of capital flow in this space, but rather in controlling the money flow in a way that benefits the long-term health of the DAO. This is called incentive alignment, which we'll get through in the next slide. The second thing I wanted to ask about is, do you guys think bribery in DAO governance should be frowned upon? So you're saying if there are people, if there is a protocol where the token holders don't even care enough about it to hold on to the tokens, then the protocol should die? Okay. Interesting take.
Feels like any robust system should be able to deal with it. Just financial compensation.
How do you mean? How do you mean financial compensation?
Like I think that if social norms are the only thing preventing bribery from damaging a DAO, you probably shouldn't participate in that system.
What about you?
At least, I don't know, it seems to me that if the if the voting is basically based on how many tokens you have, like the more tokens you have in the system, the more you would care about the success of the project. So at least like people who are engaging in privately, they care so much about the outcome that seems to me should be fun.
Like benevolent bribery in a way.
It's like it seems that if you're willing to give up your tokens for more money than that, you obviously don't have the
Gotcha.
Their vote probably the one that's fine. They have they're trying to achieve that goal. I feel like in general.
Okay. So it sounds like the consensus in this room is that the market is sort of doing its job. In that if bribery were to occur, it is a telltale sign that the protocol is not sustainable in the long term. Like it's not going to work out in the long term, or people don't believe it to work out in the long term. Yeah. Like a benevolent takeover. So this sort of these two problems like haunted the DAO world from 2017 to 2019 until there was a protocol, Compound. Surprisingly, it's a DeFi protocol that sort of figure out a way to solve it, like solve in a vague way. So like what they did was they limited what governance can do. So for in Compound, governance relates to control over the reserve assets and policy decision. To give a quick context, Compound is a money lending platform on the blockchain. It allows you to borrow money from other users through what's known as collateralized debt position, which means if one day, if you have a lot of Ether, for instance, and then you need to buy some bread, but then you don't want to lose your ETH holdings, you would go onto Compound, you would collateralize your ETH, and then they'll give you proportional amounts of USDC, which you can use to spend and buy stuff, but then you would still be exposed to any gains in ETH value. So that is what Compound does. But as mentioned just now, there needs to be some sort of ratio that is set between like how much collateralized asset you need in exchange for the amount that you borrow. That's an arbitrary number. Who gets to set that? Well, Compound decided that that's something that we could turn to the governors or the people who hold the governance token. So I'm actually let's take a quick look at how this look like. So I'm now on the Compound app. And first, let's go to market. So this is how the user interface for Compound would work. You would deposit some amount of, let's say, Ether, and then you could borrow some amount of DAI, for instance. But then for each of these assets, you have a collateral factor, which basically says for if you were to deposit $100 here, you can only take out $75 worth of Ether. And then that amount gets set by the governance. So people here can vote on changing the numbers, right? So this is a vote that has successfully passed where people set the value of collateral factor to 65%, right? So can you see the connection between what they're doing here and the issues that we were addressing just now, which is the long-term, short-term goal alignment? You put money down to vote for policies that are going to directly affect your money. Yeah, because if you were to, let's say, vote on a value that doesn't make sense, let's say we set the collateral factor to 100%, right? Because you say, hey, more collateral, the better. People are not going to use your platform, and then the value of your platform decreases. And so you have a very strict one-to-one alignment between the interest of the governance holder and also the system's health. So the system is basically benefiting from the wisdom of the crowd in setting these parameters. So users control a very limited set of nodes. Now, as soon as Compound implemented this, their value skyrocketed. So you could see here the graph. They deployed this in June, and their total value locked at that point was 1.7 billion. And then like within a few months time, we have the DAO summer, DeFi summer, and like this skyrocket to 100 billion in value. And I haven't really explicitly stated how they sort of gave out their governance token. The way it worked is when people supply their assets to Compound, they get paid in governance token. So sort of the platform is rewarding them for trusting or for using the service. And so you have this virtuous cycle where people who use that protocol believe in its long-term goals, and they get rewarded with governance token that allow them to tweak the protocol to work better, and it repeats. Now, that is an example of a financial DAO. There's also a different type of DAO that is catching a lot of attention these days, especially in crypto Twitter, and it's culture DAO. So besides financial incentive, there could also be social incentive for active participation in the DAO. And one of them is known as friends with benefits. And the users of this DApp, they call this thing, they describe it as a digital city. Because in order to sort of participate in events that are organized by Friends with Benefits, you have to own their token. And then you can join their Twitter, or you can get funding from their community treasury to work on your artistic project. You could sort of benefit from the networks. But DAOs, cultural DAO don't have to be sort of like pre-planned like that. The amazing thing about an organization that exists on a blockchain is that it can come and go at any moment. If you have enough apes or enough people on Twitter who are excited about an idea, you could very easily write a bunch of smart contracts that describes how the DAO works and then deploy it. And so there, in 2020, there was an example where the artist People Pleaser created like a short 50 seconds video, sort of like showcasing Uniswap version 3. And people were so excited about it that they decided to group together, pool their money, and form a DAO, which would purchase that asset. And it's owned by the DAO instead of each individual person. And so, right. So that's an example of how like a DAO that was formed spontaneously became sort of established over time, and it expands in its reach, and now it's buying more and more stuff. And so this particular Pleaser DAO that bought this product from People Pleaser, this NFT, they also pioneer NFT fractionalization. And it is the idea that you buy an NFT that is governed by a DAO, but then the DAO itself is governed by ERC20 tokens. So in essence, you have converted an NFT into a bunch of divisible ERC20 tokens. And so now you can have fractional share of an art piece. So that's an example of community ownership of digital assets. Sorry, what?
So traditional art shares of it, so it's kind of like they were
That's kind of interesting. I didn't know that they were doing something like that for traditional art. So you could own like shares of it.
yeah,
Mona Lisa, whatever. So like that's an established concept then. Okay. So yeah, we're gonna look at that particular video that got 500K and sort of watch the artist explain the art itself. The audio. Yeah, 500K.
These kind of actions like okay, story of this one happened on land and we DeFi as well as represent funding. And we see these groups breaking barriers and ultimately uniting the important following the important real style aesthetic with my signature tune shape, while the remix of passion and textures are inspired by limited tapestries, which are essential for leading movies, illustrations, as well as anime. Will and I have bounced ideas off of each other initially, and then sketched out a rough storyboard, which then kind of began before fully kicking off production. Colors are samples from colors that represent the various tones. The sliding segments of changing colors represents the V2 feature where you have the ability to select a certain segment of the Uniswap pricing. The constellation in the last shot represents the Uniswap liquidity pool formation, how they're interconnected but ever changing. And the effect is done completely in 3D, and the spheres are spawned at any point in space, and the lines form or break depending on the distance.
You guys think that was worth 500K? Okay. Yeah, that's actually what I'm most excited personally about, like the concept of DAO of blockchain space, is that it is encouraging like new type of artistic collaboration in the community. I think it's like a second renaissance. That's why I like it about it. So to kind of wrap up, the questions that we posed earlier, like how should DAO be treated as a company? Wyoming is actually taking the first step. So they are the first legislation in the world to officially organize DAO as a company, as an LLC. So Australia is also doing like having a Senate vote on legalizing DAO. So yeah, I kind of want to wrap it up by with this quote from the CEO of Gauntlet, Tarun Chitra, which says, DAOs is basically an amalgamation of pieces of investment banks, companies, and social clubs stitched together via cryptographic commitments. It's kind of the new sort of organization that can be formed using this novel technology that people have come up with. Some future predictions about DAOs. So this is based on a blog post by Vitalik Buterin, the guy behind Ethereum. He says that DAOs would revolutionize any service that builds upon network effects. So these include your ride-sharing app. This include banks, where the more people use the service, the more value it has. But the problem is finding the right governance model to make sure that like money doesn't sort of like run the organization amok. What we were describing throughout this presentation was coin voting, so like $1, one vote. But people are thinking about alternative to that sort of voting mechanism, such as proof of participation, where if you do work for the blockchain, let's say you write an article or you complete like a software development task, you get paid in tokens that cannot be transferred or sold. You own it permanently. And those tokens is what you use to vote. That's an example of proof of participation. An alternative is proof of humanity, which is one person, one vote. So there are certain chains that are sort of working with KYC, know your customer companies, to establish like the personhood behind the user and giving each person a token so they would have like a basic democracy. DAOs themselves also could extend. Um, uh, this guy up here on the top right corner, his name is Balaji, and he was the former CEO of Coinbase. He's proposing something known as network state, which is the idea that in the future, blockchain would become more prominent as sort of a governance of day-to-day lives than nation states would be. Here's a screenshot of his presentation that I thought was very provoking. So his idea is basically in the 20th century, you have the nation state where people are organized by geography and bicker about the beliefs or ideologies on how they want to run the country. But in the future, when blockchain systems become mature enough, then you don't bicker over beliefs. You just have people who share the same ideas working together in a shared space, and the blockchain can fund them to move around. So geography becomes secondary. That's what the network state is. And these are all the future reads for today's topic. Is there any questions that you guys have? Mhm. I wasn't sure. Can you bring that up?